So I will call to order the City Council Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee at 12:07, a rare daytime meeting, maybe something that become more common for us. And the first item on our agenda is the agenda, and I entertain a motion on that.
I would adopt the agenda as indicated, so it's large.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
So we have an agenda. Next, we have adoption of the minutes from our April 22nd meeting. And take a motion on that.
Move to adopt the agenda, the minutes, as posted on City Clerk.
Section. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting our minutes?
Aye.
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 Next, we have public forum. Is there anyone in the room here for public forum? Doesn't see you. No one signed up, so online. So if you're online and you want to speak in public forum, please indicate so by using the raise hand function. I see Sharon Busher. Go ahead, Sharon.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't sure I would be able to make this meeting, but I can. For the committee members, I sent a communication to the chair, to Councilor Barlow, about the White Walk bike plan. And I don't bike, but I walk and I drive. But for the walk bike plan, I feel it is pedestrian light. I think it's been pedestrian light for a long time. And I was hoping that as you look at this plan, that you could either create a section that would be a tickler to talk about ways to create safe spaces for pedestrians and bicyclists. My point is that the bicyclist is trying to navigate usually roads that may or may not have bike lanes, and are trying to avoid being hit by a car. And the pedestrian has to be aware of the car, the bike, and being hit by either of those. So I feel that we don't really have a lot of shared paths. And when we do, there really isn't a physical barrier to delineate where pedestrians could be safe and where bicyclists can be safe. But I really think more emphasis needs to be given to try to figure out how to make it safer for the walker. The walker doesn't have to purchase anything except shoes, and maybe even not shoes. So it's economical. And I think it is a mode that a lot of people use. So, and the other piece is that I'm hoping that walk bike committee has someone from our ADA or accessibility committee involved on a regular basis, because sometimes I don't feel that is given the attention it needs also. So those are my comments. I'm really proud of what the city is trying to do and emphasizing different modes of transportation, but I think we could do more for the pedestrian. And the pedestrian comes in all ages and sizes. And I'm including in that group people that might be in strollers or wheelchairs or some other motorized kind of assistance that they might need to walk around or get around. So, so thank you so much for hearing these comments. And I won't be staying for the meeting, so I'll have to read the minutes to see if there's any discussion about this aspect. Thanks again.
Thank you, Sharon, and I forwarded your minutes to other committee members as well as DPW staff, and asked that they be posted to the meeting material, your comments. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in public forum? Indicate so by using the raise hand function on Zoom. I'm not seeing anybody. Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll go ahead and close public forum. And move on to our deliberative agenda. And the first item on our deliberative agenda is a GMT Service Changes update. And I see Clayton Clark. Yeah. Still here with GMT. I'll let you just.
Hey, welcome to our new member. I'm Clayton, the general manager for Green Mountain Transit. And I'm going to be letting Chris, our director of planning, do most of the talking as he describes some of the things that we're looking at in regards to upcoming changes to the 1 and the 11, and as well as the 9. And it's been the last year has been very challenging for GMT, as it has been for most of the world. This has required us to sort of rethink our transit infrastructure and where we're investing. I am happy to report that some of the things that we're going to be talking about, I think, will actually be some service improvements. And so I'm pleased that that we are able to find some efficiencies that are going to be more than just thinking about reductions. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and he's going to talk about what's coming up, including some public meetings where we'll be gathering public input.
Excellent. Thank you, Clayton. So we're going to do a couple of go through a couple slides, and then we'll go into sort of live map, and I think that'll be easier for the discussion with folks here. So sort of first, just what's on the ground. One other piece I'll add is we're here talking about 3 routes actually. So the Williston, the airport, and then the number 9 Winooski. So sort of just level setting first, what the current service levels are on the 1 and the 11. So right now the 1 Williston operates every 20 minutes on weekdays from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then in less frequent times in the evening. On Saturdays it runs every 30 minutes for most of the day. And then on Sundays it runs every 45 minutes. And the number 11 airport, that route currently runs every 45 minutes for most of the day, and then less frequent as the day goes on in the evening. Saturdays it also runs every 45 minutes, and then Sundays it goes for every 45 minutes as well from 8 to 6:30. The other route that we'll be talking about is the number 9 Winooski. So this route runs every 30 minutes, and then less frequent in the evening, and then on Saturdays it runs every 60 minutes from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I just wanted to note that our board did approve a change that went into effect back in December to eliminate late night service on that particular route. So that's already on the ground. So one of the things that we're talking about here is sort of rerouting, particularly on the routes 1 and 11. That's where the sort of biggest changes are as part of what we're going to be talking about today. And so why are we talking about changing the route? It's because of new development that's happening in South Burlington. So this is actually a picture from the last time it was sunny over a month ago in city center. So this is looking west onto Dorset Street. So, a lot of development that's been happening and a lot of the work that the sort of broader community has been talking about. How do we sort of match transit to where folks are living and working? And so this, I just wanted to put a picture here. So if folks haven't walked down it, this is what it looks like. It used to just be empty grassland, essentially.
This is Market Street.
This is Market Street. Yeah, exactly. And so sort of these are some of the numbers in sort of the work that we've been doing with UVM, with the Med Center, and then the other folks that are building development that's already out there. So, as you can see, a lot of these numbers total to over 1,000, 1,200 people moving or relocating to South Burlington City Center between the 2 Hill institutions and then some market rate housing and senior housing as well. And so when we're talking about, as our service is changing, both because of budget related stuff, but also these other positive opportunities to try and match the service to where folks are. These are the numbers that we're looking at when having that conversation. So as we talk about adjusting the service, I'm just going to first highlight a couple things. So one of the things that we're talking about beyond the rerouting is adjusting the frequency on 2 of the routes that we're discussing. So on the number 1, we're looking at pushing that from every 20 minutes to every 30 minutes during the bulk of the day. And then on the number 11, we're looking at shifting that to be every 30 minutes from that 45 minutes that I talked about earlier. And so you'll see in a second sort of why that's the case, and partially on the 1, a lot of the data that we have for folks on the 1 and the 11, a majority of that ridership is between Burlington, downtown Burlington, and sort of the South Burlington, Dorset Street area. That's where a lot of folks are moving, and we're trying to sort of match that service to there. No frequency changes on the number 9. It is purely just a routing change on that one. So I'm just going to quickly highlight on the number 9. This one in the static maps, you'll see we're looking at adjusting our service on that particular route to connect to the Shaws in Colchester. That's been a long time ask of the community out there. And this particular route, there's a little bit of leeway in that particular schedule. So we're really trying to maximize the efficiency of that route and hopefully get a lot more folks to use that service. And so on the left is just showing the routing over where the Shaws and Colchester is. The bus would be going in a counterclockwise direction. And then the map on the right, we're doing 2 things. So one is aligning the service of Winooski to be bi-directional on Main Street, as they're also doing their Main Street construction similar to Burlington here. And then there's a small reduction in the western portion of Winooski in order to make this route work. So one other thing before I go to a live map of the routes that we're really here to talk about is, one of the things as we've been talking about reducing services, we're really trying to focus on these high ridership routes. And with that, we're really asking folks to walk a little bit further than they currently have been walking to utilize our service. And so one thing I wanted to highlight here on this particular screen is, so on the left is the 3 routes that sort of serve that general corridor between Pearl and Main Street. And on the right is the sort of proposed routing. And the gray polygon is essentially a 1/4 mile buffer around those 3 transit routes. And so, as you can see there, for the most part, everything is still within walking distance with moving the College Street Shuttle, the airport route, to Main Street. And so I'm just going to switch briefly to a live map because I think that'll be easier to go through these changes. Oh, that didn't switch. So one thing, I'll start with the number 1. So this dashed line here is the routing that we're proposing for the 1. So everything from the downtown transit center here, all the way through sort of Dorset Street and the U Mall is staying relatively the same. The piece that is changing is we're looking at shifting service between Dorset Street and Heinsberg Road from Wilson Road to Market Street. Looking at our sort of stop level ridership, very few folks actually travel to the Wilson Road portion of this area. And with all that development, we're trying to, again, put that bus closer to where folks are living. And so that would be in both directions. So sort of going to Wilson and to South Burlington, the bus would come up Main Street, go into the U Mall, and then circulate through City Center and then back to Wilson Road. And then on the inbound heading back into Burlington, the bus would sort of follow that same direction, again, traversing through the U Mall, heading up Dorset Street, and then going into downtown Burlington as it currently does. So the other route that is changing, let's take this. So this is the 11. So this is repurposing this service to, again, basically create a 15-minute corridor between downtown Burlington and South Burlington City Center. And so the way that we're doing that is this bus will be traveling in the same routing that the number 1 does, up Main Street and then down Dorset Street. And we'll circulate as it currently does to Kennedy Drive, Heinsberg Road, through City Center, and then back to downtown Burlington, down Main Street. And so with both the 11 and the 1 being at every 30 minutes, and having offset departure times, we're really trying to create basically a 15-minute corridor that happens between downtown Burlington and the South Burlington area. So that's, that's one of the positives that's really coming out of this, is creating high frequency routing that we haven't had in a long time, sort of despite, I think, a lot of the challenges that the organization is facing. And so, on the 11, a couple things to note is, that means there isn't service to the airport or direct service to the airport. It's still accessible from the number 1 from Wilson Road. It's about a 10-minute walk. But very few folks use the service to get to the airport, partially because the span of service doesn't really match when a bulk of the flights are leaving. They're all leaving, 6 o'clock in the morning, and right now our service does not match that. And we did have a conversation with Director Longo last week or 2 weeks ago, and talked through these particular service changes with him. The other piece you'll note is the number 11 is no longer going to the medical center. So to create this sort of 15-minute corridor, we're really trying to balance the time spent on board, where folks are coming and going, and recognizing that there's really good pedestrian infrastructure between the U Heights stop on Main Street to the Med Center. Again, it's about a 10-minute walk, and that's where we're looking to sort of make that trade-off that we think we can handle. The last piece is the number 11 also currently does go to the waterfront, and so right now the routing would not go down to the waterfront. There is a stop at the corner of Battery and College that if anybody doesn't want to walk, they can go right there, and that, with all the different routes, not just the ones that you see here, there's a bus coming to that particular stop every 10-12 minutes, essentially. I'm going to pause to see if there's sort of any general questions on this, on sort of the routing and the schedules that we're sort of thinking about for these particular routes.
Committee members. Go ahead.
So I had 2 questions. So first, the number 2 still goes to the hospital.
Correct. Yep. I should have mentioned that. So I'll put that on the map. So that the number 2 is still going. That's where we're really wanting to push folks. It's still going to run every 20 minutes, and that's where we want folks to utilize that service to get to the airport, or to the med center.
And so that great. My second question is about what you're calling the 15-minute corridor. So that means, say, I guess, so my main concern is obviously the one going from 20 to 30-minute headways, but by routing the 11 on Main Street with now 30-minute headways, that means, as you just said, that whether you're downtown or you're in South Burlington, you're trying to get to Main Street, say the university.
Correct.
You're saying that now there's essentially
Essentially a bus every 15 to 20 minutes, just depending on where things actually fall with the actual schedules, but roughly that's the improvement that we're looking to do.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
So I was also curious about the medical center specifically. First, just you mentioned you spoke with the folks at the airport. Did you also?
We're working on meeting with UVA Medical Center in the next couple weeks. They are aware of the changes through our work with CATMA and sort of that partnership. So we haven't had that official sort of meeting to discuss those service adjustments. I will note, when we look at our ridership as it stands right now, this was for the first 6 months of FY25, 25% of our ridership was from UVM, from the college, both staff, faculty, and students. A much smaller percentage is for the medical center in that.
Okay.
Yeah. So just in comparison, we're really trying to match the service to where we know folks are utilizing the service. Not to say that the medical center isn't, but it's night and day in terms of the numbers.
And then I was curious specifically about I know there's a UVM nurses housing by Market Street too.
Yep.
So would they take
So they would take either so there's going to be sort of 3 stops along Market Street. You can actually see on the map a lot of the building footprints of all the development. They would get on right at Garden and Market Street right here where the cursor is, and we get off at the UVM stop at the top of the hill
and then
walk. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I would be curious to hear, just as that's a newer development, and then Ledgewood, to me, it's right on the bus line.
Yeah.
I don't think people have fully moved in.
Right, yep, so basically it's they're planning on having full capacity within sort of the next year and a half between the UVM, the Med Center, both of their developments along that particular area. And one thing to note, a lot of both UVM and the Med Center both run their own shuttle system. One thing that we've heard in our conversations with the community is they don't want 3 different bus systems going through city center. They want GMT to provide that service there. And for example, for the Med Center, they have their parking lots spread all throughout sort of the greater area. When you look at the time that it would take if a UVM Medical Center employee was living at City Center in South Burlington, driving to one of the satellite lots, the time is pretty much equal for somebody to take the GMT bus versus having to drive to a satellite lot, wait for their shuttle to then get dropped off at the hospital. So,
Yeah.
We're talking about 2 miles, mile and a half of distance, that this is one of the easiest, I think, sort of transit decisions to make, that we know where all these folks are living and where they're working.
Right, that's why I'm focusing on that development in particular. It just seems like we are at the perfect moment to arrange the best possible bus route for this group. And but at the same time, if UVM already has a shuttle plan to that building.
They have no,
don't.
so
Okay.
well, we also
then,
did meet with, I
just
should have
make
noted, we
sure
also
that-
did meet with UVM, so that we have had that conversation. They're very supportive of the particular changes that we're outlining here.
Something that is also a really positive development that has come about because of the city of Burlington's help to GMT is that the University of Vermont Medical Center will be to an unlimited access program, which will pay the full cost. And so right now UVM sort of has that benefit for all of their students and employees. And so that'll be for all the employees at this medical center too.
I'll ask just a couple of questions. You're making assertions about like ridership and things. Is this information that you're able to collect now that you have the new pass system that you weren't able to before?
So to an extent, so I think the information around say like the 25% UVM or that 25% of our ridership is related to UVM, that yes comes from the fare system. But in terms of where folks are traveling at the stop level, that's something that we do right now every 3 years. And so that's not something related to the fare system. But actually this current fiscal year is another year that we are required by the federal government to do that stop level analysis. So I'm really excited that if we do make these changes, we will be able to sort of capture that because a lot of that information is what ties into the federal funding piece for us.
And so you have someone that actually rides the buses and records people?
So yeah, so every 3 years we hire, we work with a temp agency to basically ride every single trip of our service and count basically all the ons and offs.
Okay.
We do have, we're working on getting automatic passenger counters, and so that's basically, so we can do that all the time and rotate our buses throughout our entire system. So we have the technology on board, we're working on some of the software pieces.
Right.
So that we can capture that information a lot more readily and make decisions and see what those impacts are a lot quicker.
That would seem like a key capability,
Yeah.
given the
Yeah.
financial pressures
Yeah.
and the need to sort of optimize.
Yeah, there's a lot of technology pieces that I think we're really coming to head that I think we'll be able to do that pretty soon.
And the other thing that I just applaud you is to increase the frequency. I've always said, I mean, that's what keeps people that have choices from using the bus system is the frequency and the convenience. It's not about the cost of it. So the more we can do to increase the frequency, I think it's going to help you increase ridership beyond people whose only mode of transportation. So,
It's, with the coming year, financial uncertainty. It may be hard to do this, but, our hope is that what we come out of after this fiscal crisis is that where we are operating, it's with high frequency, and then if we can't do high frequency, then, we're not gonna, provide, because having all of these routes that are less frequent and lower ridership is really not where we're gonna be able to continue to operate.
And the other thing I'll note too is particularly you know, as I had those images of the city center, I think one of the things that's also, you know, really positive is with all the development that's happening at the old mall site and with Pine and St. Paul being reconnected in the next few years, that's something where I know we're really looking forward to working with DPW on how can we adjust some of the routings of our routes to serve those new streets that are, especially since they're right by our transit center, and how we can serve those particular corridors and serve sort of that lower Main Street once Great Streets is done, and projects like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on sort of the routing piece of it?
Yeah, just one thing you had said that there were no changes in Winooski, it was a rerouting.
It was just the rerouting, but no
But there
frequency
But
changes.
there is a late night, you're eliminating late night service?
So on Saturdays, our board has already approved to eliminate late night service.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this went into effect last December. So
Yeah.
It's already been happening.
So all of those service changes were sort of really focused on late night and weekends, where we're moving fewer folks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So moving forward to, we have a couple of public hearings scheduled to get comments on these particular changes. So we have our first one scheduled on January 9th at 5:30, June 9th, excuse me, at 5:30 PM at the South Burlington City Hall. And then we have another one scheduled on June 10th at noon via Zoom. So those are our two. And then folks can always write into planning@rygmt.com to submit comments if they can't make it to either of the two meetings. That's it.
Could you make the presentation available for?
Yes.
Conclusion
Yeah.
of the meeting?
Yeah, so I have in the PowerPoint, I have some also static images as well that will help show the same information as well.
Thank you. Well, thanks for that. Can I ask you a question, just a more general question about like funding? Like, where did you end up with in the legislature? I know that it was sort of moving and evolving up until what, a couple of weeks ago, maybe?
Yeah, and so happy to report that the governor's budget included more funds than we were originally planning, and that's why the reductions that the board approved for going into effect this summer were in about the $1 to $1.2 million range instead of the higher range. And so we're very happy with that, while at the same time knowing that when we look ahead to fiscal year 27, that we will have a $3 million funding gap. The state, does its funding, a year at a time. And so I didn't get much traction when it came to, hey, let's talk about fiscal year 27, because they're like, we'll talk about that next year. And so going into it, we know that we have a $3 million gap. My perception is that VTrans would like to meet us with that gap, but I know that they are under their own financial challenges. And it seems like a lot of legislators that have been hesitant to act so far will be more willing to act next year when it's a bigger reductions on the table. And so my hope is that, or the plan is that we will put another service reduction list out to the public sometime in November or December. That will be a little closer to the legislative session. I think that one of the, if I could do last year over again, I would say that we got a lot of interest from legislators, the media, and the public last September. And then by the time the legislature rolled around in January, it had kind of, been old news. And so having the reductions in the public meetings to talk about the reductions, happening in December, I think will be much better timing for us.
Well, thank you. And it's just really unfortunate, and I'll say this is an editorial comment, that we continually find ourselves in a situation where GMT, our only sort of mass transit provider, can't even do any like 2 or 3 or 4 year like planning.
Yes.
Because you're always trying to scrape and claw to get any funding you can. And I do think when you're talking about $3 million gap for next year, if they don't meet you, we're going to continue to erode the routes and frequencies in a way that will sort of feed into what I think you called at other times the death spiral.
Yes.
Just a slower spiral, you
Yes.
know.
Well, I'm hopeful that, because we're seeing the rural, other rural transit agencies have to cut service now, where that wasn't happening last year. That there's gonna be much more of an appetite for a more statewide comprehensive solution. Because it's no longer just an urban issue. I think that will be, helpful for us. I also think that, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens, if we continue to move forward with the rural transfer. And so, rural community transit has already given V-Trans the indication that they're happy to take over all of our Franklin, Grand Isle, and Stowe seasonal service. Tri-Valley Transit seems like they're just about to make the same decision for Washington County and River Valley seasonal service. And so, my hope is that when GMT, goes back to being an urban only entity, that maybe that this would be the time, to talk to the state about, updating how we do these financial transactions so that it's more predictable, so that it's not always, coming in every year and wondering what we're getting, then finding out 2 months before the fiscal year starts, what we're getting from the state, because that makes it almost impossible to plan.
And thanks for all the work, and again, let us know on this committee how we can be helpful to you.
And I appreciate the work that this committee of the full city council did on the resolution. I know that, that certainly got some folks' attention when that came in, and so appreciate that effort to highlight.
So, yes, there are no more questions from the committee. We'll close that item. Thank you again for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And,
We are staff is planning to have a meeting with their staff before the board has to vote on these service changes. I'm on the board, as you all know, and so there are some questions we talked about, hospital connectivity. There's questions about waterfront connectivity. And so, for a long time, the city had a focus up College Street for being a transit corridor. This would be a market change from that. But I do fundamentally believe reinvesting in Pearl and Maine as our predominant transit corridors is a better long-term strategy than trying to keep 3 transit corridors funded through the city. So happy to receive your comments and feedback, but we'll continue to work with GMT.
Did everybody see, this is silly, but did everyone see the April Fool's joke about the gondola up Main Street?
I did cursor, I see that.
Gondola on Main Street and gondola on Pearl Street. Just putting that out there.
I think it's.
I think the corridors are very smart.
Yeah.
Maple Street would be better, like a whole scheme over Maple Street. So stupid.
I still like the light rail thoughts from the 90s.
the monorail of the south is.
Connecting, like the waterfront
Yeah.
to the airport, that'd be
I mean,
perfect.
but, we're joking about this, but I do think that Mark's comment is also related because not only does this year by year situation make it hard to just do the basics of what you're doing now, but it also really kind of tamps down our ability to innovate as a state and as a county, as a city. That there are other transportation options of all kinds that we should really be thinking about. I mean, transportation is our second largest source of emissions in the state, and it's fundamental to everyone's lives. And so I really hope we see some progress on that at the statewide level. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, next we have the planBTV walk bike action plan.
And here. We have our consultant as well, Karen. Enjoy that. Analysts, full of slides to share as context. Hey, everybody, Philip Peterson, Senior Transportation Public Works, back again with planBTV walk bike action plan, safety action plan. Excited to talk about this important plan and hopefully get the 2 approvals so we can bring it to city council next week. I did send an email to all of you last Wednesday to answer your questions as best as I could and provide some context around what it is that we're doing. We have had some internal meetings with our grants team. and with FHWA to kind of come up with a strategy to figure out what's the best way to move forward where we're meeting federal guidelines and also threading the needle when it comes to the mayor's priorities and sticking to our values and what we think is the best to do. And we can talk about that some more, but I'll turn it over to Karen so she can provide some information. No.
Great. Karen Suntoff with BHBA. I've been helping to support this effort with a whole host of folks involved on a committee as well. So appreciate the time to just step through the safety action plan that we've developed. And really the focus of this work, certainly we looked at all of the sort of crash data and information gathering, but really when we home in on the most serious and egregious crashes on our system, that was really the focus area and really helps to meet the spirit of the Safe Streets for All program. So here you're seeing an infographic just to give you the sort of breadth of our data-driven process. We were really focused again on those serious crashes. This has a lot of moving parts on it, but really to focus your attention on the last 5 and 10 years and the breakdown of that crash data and with those most serious crashes, sort of who's involved. And so in the last 10 years, we're talking about 26 pedestrian serious injuries, 11 bicyclist serious injuries, and I believe 1 fatality. So when we really dive into the data and focus our attention, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about you know, those serious injury crashes and those fatalities that happen on our roadways. And that's really what drove our process in terms of trying to identify ways to address that. So out of this data-driven process, a few emphasis areas emerged. And I really just want to highlight a couple of key things here. More than 40% of our serious crashes are involving pedestrians and bicyclists. So really sort of validates our focus on those 2 modes. And then overwhelmingly, 73% of serious crashes occur on our arterial roadways. So when we think about where to focus our energies, focus our attention, focus our investments, those are the places that we're homing in on. And you can see those threads through the action plan document. So really 3 emerging categories out of all of that sort of data-driven process. And this was complemented with, you know, looking at all types of crashes. It was complemented with lots of input from the public through an online tool where we sort of ingested lots of information and heard from folks about where they feel unsafe on the system. So, you know, pulling all of those pieces together with that emphasis around those serious crashes, 3 emerging categories sort of came out of that: crossing safety, turning movement safety, and arterial corridor treatments. Those are the places that we feel, you know, to address the real issues that we have in terms of safety for walking and biking. Those are the areas that we want to focus our attention.
Can I just ask, what does the arterial corridor treatments mean?
We can dig into that a little bit deeper, and we will, but that was really so, you know, when we talk about serious crashes, most of our serious crashes, particularly for walking and biking, are happening on our corridors that are really connector corridors. They're not our local streets. Yes, I fully understand. I live on a street in Burlington, right? Like, I feel like people go fast down my street, like something needs to happen to calm that traffic. I've got little kids, they're playing in the road. I totally get that. But when we really talk about, you know, the safety issue when it comes to those most serious crashes, we're talking about those connector roadways. We're talking about our Main Street, our Colchester Avenue, our, you know, North Avenue, sort of those main arterials through our city. And so that's really where we wanted to focus our attention and really dove into what are the proven countermeasures that we can apply to our arterial corridors. What are those treatments that are going to move the needle in terms of
Okay, so like a
safety.
treatment would be something like a speed table or like something to
Exactly.
Yeah.
Enhancements to your crossings or some other
Or having
countermeasure.
a crossing period. In
Yes.
some cases.
Absolutely. So we dug in and looked at the proven safety countermeasures. This is work that FHWA has supported, and through the research, we're able to actually, take a lot of information that's been gathered over a longer period of time, and folks have dug into all these different types of treatments and how effective they actually are. So a crash modification factor, just to sort of level set the conversation here, is really telling us what is the efficacy of that particular treatment, and sort of proven through the research. So we gathered up the potential strategies or countermeasures that we were thinking would be applicable to the types of crashes and the sort of causality of those crashes on our system, and then started to think about how we were going to actually apply those to some projects and emphasis areas. We came up with some systemic and policy actions. These are sort of those higher level things that really, when looking at those most serious crashes, again, really focusing our attention on what of those countermeasures are going to help to move us in the right direction when it comes to walking and biking safety, and eliminating or reducing the severity of those most serious crashes. So, just for an example here at the top line, maximum spacing for pedestrian crossings. We're finding that when there is a large gap on the system between, safe and channelized crossings for pedestrians, we have crossing activity that's not anticipated by folks, and has been it's an issue that we want to address when it comes to those most serious crashes involving walking and biking. So that's just one example, but came up with a whole host of strategies, and certainly can answer questions if folks have questions after reviewing the plan on any of those sort of priority, systemic, and policy actions. And then we shifted our attention to our focal corridors. So we did look at sort of crash patterns across the geography. There wasn't anything that was emerging in a way that we felt there was sort of like hotspots around the city that we needed to focus attention, but certainly that overwhelming percentage of crashes occurring on our arterial roadways meant we wanted to focus attention on those sort of connecting roadways through the city. And so we dug in and started to think about, okay, given lots of different moving mechanisms, if we had to prioritize where we wanted to spend investments, where we wanted to put our dollars, to start to tick down these numbers, how would we prioritize sort of one corridor against the other and treatments on one corridor against the other? So we came up with a prioritization framework to be able to do that. It's not to say that this is the approach thou must take to start to make these investments and push along some of these projects, but it's a framework within which we can at least have something to help us make those decisions, especially when we sort of have two things that are weighted sort of alike. It helps us to make those decisions with some data behind it. So we came up with a whole host of criteria. I'll just highlight here that our crashes are really the sort of highest weighted thing here. So both all types of crashes across the system occurring with bikes and pedestrians involved. And then our most serious crashes, and that's including all types of crashes. So vehicular, crashes and all types of crashes that are resulting in a fatality or a serious injury. A couple of other things that came up in the process, certainly we heard loud and clear, particularly from the Walk Bike Council, network connectivity was a key factor. So we bumped up the weighting on that one to be weighted 2 times, the rest of the criteria. And certainly things like the demographics of our various neighborhoods, destination access, and then moving down the list, at a relative scale, I'm trying to incorporate some of the things like ease of implementation and cost of the project. So all of those were used on our focal corridors. And we came up with sort of a prioritization scheme. And again, not you have to use this roadmap, but a framework within which we can start to help ourselves make some decisions when it comes to making investments on the system and where we think we're going to get the biggest return on investment in terms of moving those numbers down and helping to improve the safety for walking and biking. So this is our prioritized list of focal corridors across the city. And then once we had our sort of focal corridors and the combination of the proven countermeasures, we took a look back at the comprehensive plan to understand what projects were still sort of part of that comprehensive planning and maybe aren't at their sort of long-term or medium-term state. And so using that, we really identified a lot of carry forward projects that have already been identified as part of our comprehensive planning in the city for these modes, and making sure that those got carried forward into this plan. And a lot of those were, focused on these corridors and are incorporating those proven countermeasures that we know are going to improve the safety for walking and biking. So we took that and complemented it with some newly identified treatments on the corridors to come up with a plan on paper for what we would tackle when it came to those arterial corridors. And just to give you an example here, so you can sort of understand what that looks like within the plan. This is looking at the North Avenue corridor. Gives a little brief in the plan about, some of the changes that have already come for that corridor, some of the evolution for that corridor, and then highlights those specific countermeasures and actions that we propose as part of the plan to make those upgrades. And you'll see an indication to the right of any that are carry forward projects from the previous comprehensive plan or new projects that are incorporated as part of this plan. So that's really to lay out the sort of details of the plan that you all have had in front of you and had a chance to digest. I'm happy to step back and answer any questions you have. We can certainly dive into any details that you feel are still needing to be addressed before we carry this plan forward to hopefully to recommend it to City Council for approval.
So with this information and then understanding what funding we do have available and also the political elements, FHWA staff, our grants team, and this great plan that BHP has put together, we came up with a strategy of moving forward with a pedestrian safety improvement project. So a slate of projects that would be crosswalk visibility enhancements, new crosswalks, some of it I would consider maintenance issues, intersections like College and Willard that don't have ped heads, things like that. And intersection safety enhancements, work that may not be the big focal corridor projects where we're taking on a Shelburne Street doing an entire road diet, but instead we'll put into new crossings on Shelburne Street, but will be a little expensive because we'll wind up putting in hawks. A hawk is a pedestrian activated signal that is literally not, it's an RFP, it's a red light. But those are high ticket projects and would require grant dollars. So that's kind of the direction that we feel like is best to go. Again, I'm happy to answer questions, and I would be amiss if I didn't thank CCRPC for their partnership and helping to fund this project. I know Cy with the CCRPC is here as well, and he's available to answer questions too. Committee members.
I have a couple of questions just to clarify. This is great. I really love the focal corridor prioritization. That's like, I know we talked about this last time and I feel like you nailed it. It's very easy to understand. But I do notice that Willard Street is not anywhere on that list. Is that not considered a focal corridor? But then Phil, you just mentioned Willard and College, I think,
as a pedestrian improvement. Yeah.
So where is like that list?
I mean, that's its own project. Willard doesn't really fall into the category of a focal corridor in terms of net connectivity. It's just not. Has some connectivity already, but no, it's not what I would consider to be a focal.
Okay, so I guess I'm curious, you said that there's other projects that are ongoing that we might be able to use this funding for, and I'm just curious, what, is that list in this document somewhere?
No, that's a working list that we have right now. We're working with the grants team, several. Several places in the city that we know need pedestrian safety upgrades. As Karen pointed out, we have this new policy that we've created where every quarter mile, we want to make sure that we have crossing opportunities. North Avenue is a great example of, there are long stretches. If you go north of Ethan Allen Parkway to Letty Park, there's no crossings. And if we do put a crosswalk in there, we know it requires some kind of enhancement. Locations like that, St. Paul Street, there's locations along St. Paul that we know. And then even adjacent to UVM campus on Prospect, there are some stretches where there's no crossing opportunities. And when we do these crossings, it's not just paint, but there's other improvements that we have to do along with it.
Great, and then just so, when we approve this, if we get this grant, am I understanding correctly, that's sort of like the top 5 things on slide 62 will be what we use the money for? Is that what you're?
No, what we're approving right now, or what you would be approving right now, is our opportunity to go to city council and get this plan approved. Once the plan is approved, it is our safety action plan that allows us to apply for a Safe Streets for All grant. This is not the application for the Safe Streets for All grants.
Right, but once we get the grant, would we use that in the way that you've laid out in terms of choosing the projects to use the money for?
Well, in terms of the projects, we're not, which slide are you referring
I
to?
guess I'm looking at slide 62, and the way I'm reading this is that this is the priority order of the focal corridors, right? So number 1, Winooski Avenue.
Well, we know that
So
the
if
city
we
doesn't
have-
have an appetite for large scale focal corridor projects. Sorry.
I just want, so to me, the way I'm reading this is that if we approve this plan, we go get the grant, we get the money, then the first projects that we would do with that money would be in the order that they're prioritized on this list.
Yeah, go
And
for
that's
it.
not,
So it is a little more
I
nuanced
understand.
than that. It's basically that the systemic and policy actions would be the envelope for some of these projects that Philip was referring to that might be part of that grant application. But a project or action needs to be represented in the plan itself for it to be eligible for those implementation grant funds. So something like a College and Willard improvements to pedestrian, to ped heads, so actually getting that signalization equipment out there would, in my mind, fall under the uniform pedestrian phasing and signals bucket. That is a priority action and one of our systemic and policy actions that we've identified. So it sort of fits into the plan in that way, as opposed to something that maybe is a treatment on North Avenue that we've identified as part of the focal corridor. So there's a couple of moving pieces. And I can see that that's sort
I
of,
guess at a basic level, I'm
challenging
trying to
to-
understand, if we get the money, what will we do with it? It's
So
my
the
question.
pedestrian crossing improvements that Philip kind of listed off and new crosswalks.
Okay.
So we're focusing on that policy strategy of not having more than a quarter mile between crosswalks, and then crosswalk enhancements. And some of those are along the focal corridors. But it's just like sort of one piece of the recommendation rather than like a corridor transformation.
Right.
That makes sense.
Right. Yeah, we know that Main Street has a lot of work that we want to do on it. But we're not really in a position to start tackling Main Street again, because Main Street already has a pretty large project on it right now. And we just, a large focal corridor project on other streets, we're just not in a position to apply for that kind of but this, a large pedestrian improvement project where we have locations throughout the city, would be a good use of federal dollars.
That helps.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think I'll just say that, yeah, I think this is great. Given the context, which it did take me a bit to understand, that the context of this plan is purely related to the Safe Streets for All grant. Understanding that context, I think this plan is great for what it does. Especially, yes, I've lived here for 4 years, and every time I feel unsafe crossing College and Bullard, so sorely needed, and Shelburne Road or Shelburne Street. I see my friends on Hoover Street and get off on the other side of the road at the bus stop right there at Hoover Street. You're just not crossing that street. You're just not, during certain times of the day. So I think, yeah, I think using these priorities as what this is, a roadmap, a plan, and picking the places that are most sorely in need of pedestrian infrastructure. I think it's great. I've been supportive of this since the PAC had been meeting. I think I just wanted to say that I don't think I have any questions. I've been following this since the PAC started, so I think it's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Appreciate it. I think it's really difficult to separate the two, the Safe Streets for All grant and the Safety Action Plan, but they are two separate things. I think we're just trying to address your questions from the April meeting. It was brought up, like, what are we applying for? How are we applying for it? Obviously, the political temperature is a little bit different than what it was a couple of years ago. So we're trying to figure out the best way to move forward so we can capitalize on a plan that we've created and capture some dollars, make some good projects happen in the city. But they are two separate things. I hope that helps. But I appreciate the comments.
Thank you. So thank you for this, and I'm fully supportive of the application for the Safe Streets for All. And insofar as the walk bike action plan will get us there, I think we should support it. My questions were sort of along the same lines as Becca's.
Sure.
It's like, it's a fairly big meaty plan, and you're asking us to approve it so that you can use it to help you qualify for this grant. But I have questions around how much flexibility there is within the plan. We've seen other plans, they're used as sort of doctrine when we move forward with projects. And my worry, or my concern, I should say, it's not worry, is that we'll say, oh, we approved this plan, it's in the plan, we need to do it now, or we need to support it, we can't deviate from it. What I'm hoping is there's flexibility moving forward in this plan. So there's actually treatments that I can think of one in particular in my neighborhood, the signalization at Shore and North Avenue, where people are they're waiting for the pedestrian crossing to come on, counting to 6, and then making a left-hand turn onto Shore, which endangers pedestrians. That's not mentioned in here, and it's really it's an enhancement for the car modality, but it actually does represent a safety improvement for all modalities, right? And so that's not captured here. So I would hate for a project like that, for instance, not to be considered moving forward because it wasn't in the enumerated list of things that the study showed. And so I guess I'm asking for your assurance that if we approve this today, that we won't be held to the letter of the plan, but we'll still have flexibility on making other improvements that support the overall safety of transportation network, but they may be car-centric improvements that still help the other modalities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're learning every day new safety issues that residents are experiencing. We're also doing the new North End, planBTV new North End. So like we're getting input from many different places, not just this one plan that's dictating how we do projects, but
North Ave did have a corridor study. Shore Road is definitely on our radar. So we are doing a little bit of an investigation on some right-of-way acquisition. Because it does need to be realigned. That's a long-term situation, we start talking about that. And it's definitely a project that hasn't fallen off the table for sure. And it's a plan, right? It's a plan, and we're not just held to it. And Chip probably can speak to that as well.
While I'm here, a plan is a guidance document. It is not a standard, it is not a requirement. That I will not bring you items and say you have to do it because it's in a plan. What I will say is it's consistent with the direction we laid out, or it's not consistent with the direction we laid out. Ultimately, it's your decision whether to take that recommendation and proceed with it. I appreciate, frankly, everybody's comments here, and yes, this is not everything. And there are, what I see in the key kind of priority actions are, here are the strategies we need to employ. The intersection that we need to tackle will change because of any future crashes that occur, or any adjacent development that's occurring, or any public sector utility work in the area. So I can't tell you the order of things, but when we go for a grant, we're going to say, okay, what are the priorities? What are the contextual factors we know that are consistent with the plan, and apply for those items that meet that nexus of consistent with the plan, plus meet the on the ground urgencies of the day. You know, South End neighborhood coordinated development, if that thing pops, then intersection improvements around that development are going to become really important because of the increased travel capacity at that location. So thanks for the consideration, and thanks to the councilors who served on the committee. I'm really excited. And I think we heard from former Councilor Busher wanting to see more of a pedestrian approach. The grant we're proposing to put together is a pedestrian grant. I agree. We need to focus on the 80/80. How do we make the city friendly for vulnerable users across the board?
But I think that, and Councilor Busher sort of alluded to this too, when we make enhancement for pedestrians, it's sort of like the lowest common denominator. If it's safer for people walking and rolling,
Yeah.
then it's safer for bikers and cars.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, you guys have to dig it up, but it's sort
Yeah.
of rational that it would be that way. So I think it's
Agreed.
smart to take that as strategy.
Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, what my only other comment was to ask you to reflect on what Councilor Busher said. I think you did sum it up. I think that there is actually, has a pedestrian focus.
Yeah.
That's what we're applying for, hopefully.
Just one last question on to Councilor Busher's point. We have this new council on aging in Burlington, and we have an accessibility council as well. I'm just wondering, this is outside of this topic, but are we, are you all talking with those groups? And it seems like that would be, they're pretty new.
Yeah, I'm part of the accessibility committee. It meets once a month, and I will be there in, I think, a couple of weeks. It's coming fast, and they wanted to discuss some of these things at the next committee meeting. So yeah, we'll have those conversations.
That's the accessibility committee. We have not met with the newly constituted committee that you were just referring to.
We have been, AARP was on our project advisory committee,
I
but
remember they came.
the Council of Aging sounds new, and
Yeah.
be happy to engage with them
Yeah,
too.
for sure.
So you're seeking some council action. I don't know if there's councilors on the committee who would like to move the requested action.
I would move that the TUC approves and recommends that the city council approves the planBTV walk bike safety action plan.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, that's by Robert, please indicate by saying
Aye.
Aye.
and that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like a lot of work. Appreciate it.
I don't get to go anywhere. I stay right here.
Okay, next, we're moving on to the New North End sidewalk scoping study.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, let's go on.
I think it's just me.
Just you?
Just me. It's, so, yeah, Philip Peterson, again, Senior Transportation Planner, DPW. Would like to, again, thank, the CCRPC, and I think they're probably staff.
You want to end screen sharing?
That's.
Okay. Maybe Rob.
There, it's
you
done.
can-
It's gone.
Okay.
The CCRPC for funding this study. We learned a lot, had some good projects last year, the pedestrian zone on Stanbury. And what we're looking for is for the two to approve the new North End sidewalk scoping studies, so it can be brought to City Council for final approval. This study would be used again to apply for potential grant dollars. The basic recommendations, Stanbury Road would get a concrete sidewalk. Basically your meat and potatoes sidewalk. If you've ever been to the New North End, there's kind of this oddity that is Dale Road, Stanbury Road, where it is one street, but it has two names. And the sidewalk ends on Dale Road, and then there's no sidewalk on Stanbury. So very straightforward, a sidewalk project that would connect that neighborhood together. Green Acres Drive, what we would look at this year, and this was based on input from that particular neighborhood, is potential seasonal pedestrian zone, similar to what we put on Stanbury, to just evaluate the feasibility for a permanent sidewalk. So a bit of a potential for a road diet situation where we would take some of the street space, the paved space, for a sidewalk. Basically the neighborhood was like, we don't want to lose trees, we don't want to lose parking, our fences, our gardens. So if we could investigate this as a possibility for a potential future sidewalk project, let's do that. Cottage Grove and Waldo Drive, that neighborhood. Basically the consensus was, a no-build situation. The neighborhood is more interested in traffic calming interventions. And so we will kind of explore that, but that's a separate discussion from the sidewalk scoping study. And so pending to approval, we will coordinate with other city departments. As we all know, there's some housing goals, and the New North End is part of those housing goals. So how we connect that neighborhood together and keep everybody safe and pedestrian connectivity, that's kind of where these projects are at. So happy to answer any questions.
Committee? I have questions. This is my neighbor.
I know it's your neighborhood.
I
Mine too.
I would actually appreciate if you went first, so I could get more.
Yeah.
context.
Sure.
Okay, thank you for bringing this back. The question, I guess I'll take it in the order that you listed it, in the document on the Stanbury Road Alternative 3.
Yep.
That's the corridor that was used pylons last year and
Yep.
the line, and it was actually quite well received. I talked to a lot of folks, and a few people didn't like it and started moving cones around, I know, at various times, but generally, the people that I talked to liked the ability to have a safer way to move on Stanbury. Stanbury and Dale used to be two different roads. I think that may even had a barrier between the two way back in
Road filter.
but yeah, I'm supportive of this. I guess I question whether or not you talked to the property owners that on that north side of.
On Stanbury,
On Stanbury.
I mean, we have spoke to the property owners.
And they're generally
and-
supportive.
I mean, generally, yes. I mean,
Okay.
it is the least invasive. If we were gonna put a sidewalk in, there's not really any, there may be like one or two curb cuts, driveways. But it's mostly people's side of their property, and we're not ruining gardens or
Right.
taking out fences or any big trees. And it just seemed to kind of make the most sense. This doesn't mean that we're moving forward with this shovels in the ground tomorrow. I mean, obviously there will be more conversations to be had around the new sidewalk. But yeah, we did speak to the neighborhood, and I think folks in general were supportive of it.
I said general support of local residents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Cottage Grove, Loaldo Drive, totally agree. It's a really challenging situation to try to figure out how to shoehorn a sidewalk and
It's tricky.
Right.
and would probably be extremely expensive. So I'm actually glad that that came out as a no bid recommendation.
Yeah, I think our consultants were discussing like, we should do some more data collection. And I think the project manager, Maddie Sender, said they don't want a sidewalk. There's a lot of other streets. We should zero in on neighborhoods where, you know, we know that sidewalk is gonna work out. So that was kind of the decision there.
And then the last one, the Green Acres one,
Yes.
the image that's shown, that's the corner where Green Acres, North Avenue's on the right-hand side of the, I'm just making sure I'm oriented correctly.
Yes.
North Avenue would be on the right-hand side of
That's
the image,
Yes.
and that's sort of the bend on the left-hand side.
Yeah,
as
correct.
Green Acres heads up toward, Lualdo.
Yep.
So I know that we heard from we heard from at least one of the residents who's near the
bend.
sort of bend, yeah, who was concerned about their gardens and some other things. So this proposal would keep everything on the street, and would you delineate it with cones? Like
It would be similar to the project we did last year on Stanbury. And it's one of those things where we're testing it out for the summer, see what folks think about it. And if there's appetite with neighborhoods like, wow, this worked out really well. Really wasn't that big of a deal when it comes to parking. Yeah, it's great. Be a good project for the future. Because if we did do a sidewalk project, we would be taking up that space.
Right.
You know, some of it would be greenbelt and some sidewalk, and you know, we're taking over. Parking would go away, asphalt would be in the sidewalk. Which is great for traffic calming because you're on the street. But at the same time, you know, you're still putting in the sidewalk, and you know, this is a good way to gauge the appetite to do that.
And will it be marked for just pedestrians only? Because I know when they had the pilot project on Stanbury last year, you had sort of.
There's space for
cyclists,
bicycles too, yeah. I mean, what we had last year, there was plenty of space for both, because we took up, you know, the entire parking lane, which is feet. So this one, I think we probably would have enough space. But it might not, if it doesn't.
The picture wide enough only for pedestrians.
Well, then we'd have to get into the design with our team. Sit down with AutoCAD and see how much space we actually have to work with that would make sense geometrically. If it's that 6-foot space, then it's not really gonna be enough space for bicyclists to, it would be pedestrians only.
You see, if you put signage and things.
Yes.
Yes. It'd be interesting to see, you know, as you
Yeah.
watched it, what the behaviors were.
It's a big petri dish.
Yeah, it is.
It is, yeah, it's a petri dish.
Yeah, okay, but that makes sense to me. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Great.
Good.
And so I guess that's that. You need
If you would approve it.
You need
to
to have-
go to city council.
and so once this is approved, this is essentially another planning document.
It's another planning document, and it's something that we can point at if we were to apply for, say, V-Trans bike ped grant or a large construction grant for Stanbury, for instance. Or a small scale grant. You know, it allows us to apply for those.
Yeah.
And also is a guiding document that helps us.
Do you anticipate you would do the Green Acres pilot this year?
I think so, yeah.
The staff has capacity, yes, and for the Stanbury one, Philip nailed it. I would really like to have this in the list of potential sidewalk build out projects. It is a through street in the New North End, a cut through, so there is a fair bit of traffic without any sidewalk. And I think it's a good candidate for a Vermont bike ped grant. And we'll get later in my director's report about the administration's kind of current capital priorities. And where they see the kind of highest need, but this puts it in a bucket of council has viewed it finds it generally acceptable so that we can apply for grants and not have to worry about, the council saying we don't want to do this project.
One of my, I think it's a good project. And if it seems like I indicated earlier, the response was generally positive about providing pedestrian safety along Stanbury. I mean, one of my concerns, and I took one of these calls on my way to this meeting from a constituent, is the conditions of our road. Someone asked me, when is my road gonna be paved? And so as we add more sidewalk and infrastructure, we have more to maintain. And some of the dollars that we might take to build out a sidewalk, if it wasn't a grant
Right.
and it was coming out of street capital, might be better spent. I mean, someone could make the argument it might be better spent
The new sidewalk.
on current construction. I mean, current needs, which there are many.
Right. Same's not same. New sidewalk, in this case would be mostly grant dollars. So we would be utilizing somebody else's money to build the sidewalk. Would also say with sidewalk, the lifespan is just ridiculously way longer than paving the street, but I do understand that perspective.
And that's for you all as policymakers, and I'll share what the administration has, but it sounds like you and the administration are in similar perspectives with a kind of maintain what we have first before we build out the network. There's nothing here that says we have to apply for a grant, but at least after spending this money of the CCRPC's money, not even our money, to finish this project, at least we say we agree with the recommendations, then we can decide later whether to advance them.
Where to fit it in the scheme of priorities.
Yes.
Right.
And grant funding obviously would be a big, if we got, restricted funding for a sidewalk project,
Right.
and we couldn't use it to not streets or repair streets.
Right.
I also preview this as a conversation we're gonna have later this year about the transportation plan. We do have housing goals, and a lot of that housing will be happening in the new North End, and so making your sidewalk network more connected is almost like a maintenance issue if you're gonna put in a lot of housing.
Understood.
So, and we have to caution ourselves with like, okay, we gotta maintain what we have, but there's gonna be more houses, more people, more cars, more bikes, more pedestrians.
I'm not sure how much of that housing is going on that west of North Avenue, but
Right.
nevertheless, I take the
Right.
plan.
Yeah.
Okay, well, with that understanding that this is just in the good idea bucket, and I would, do you want me to move since it's my area?
Go for it.
It's sort of
Yeah.
on
It is.
practice and all. Like we find
No, we
the,
all need more of that.
I don't see is there a motion in the memo?
Yes.
Under request. On the first page.
On the first page.
Getting a memo.
First page, the request. I would move that the Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee approve the following. I would move that the two approve and recommend that the city council approve the recommended preferred alternatives, the new North End sidewalk scoping study in attachment.
Okay.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you again. You betcha. Next. We have ParkMobile, no, we have the Ledgewood Circle Street acceptance item.
Yep. I'm excited about this, and staff will provide you the detail.
Yeah, great.
Questions.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to sit in front of you all. My name's Caleb Mann. I'm Associate Public Works Engineer with our Technical Services Division. And yeah, this is something I've been working on for the last 2 years. We don't accept streets in the city of Burlington very often. And just to start, I kind of want to just talk about that a little bit. How the city accepts a street and how we have some what we call unaccepted streets. Something that's a little unique to Burlington to be a accepted public street is that portion of the roadway has to be deeded to the city, just like any other property transfer. The one interesting thing here, at least in Burlington, is to become said accepted street, city council must pass a resolution acknowledging and accepting that the deed was transferred and the city via resolution is accepting the street. So that's just kind of one of the unique things about Burlington here. In this particular case, Ledgewood Circle, I don't know if you're all familiar with this area, but it's down by Oak Beach and it connects Oak Ledge and connects Oak Beach with Austin Drive. There are numerous condos in that area, all little offshoots off Oak Beach, Southwind, and even Ledgewood Circle proper. So the city owns Oak Beach, we own Southwind, we own Austin Drive. But to be clear, the city does not own the roads and the parking lots leading into these condo associations.
You bring the
Yeah.
images.
Yeah,
People that are around it. It was helpful to me when you described this, to be honest.
Yeah. No problem.
and it is quite the packet. It's some pretty dry reading, to be honest, and I'll do my best to spare you some of that.
It's actually better look at it.
Yeah, we have a real plat. And I'll keep rambling on here, but
Shades at the end of the packet.
it would be packet. The best one would be towards the end. But either way, we got this request from a former city councilor about 2 years ago, asking us to look into why this wasn't an accepted street currently. As we began diving into that, what we found was through a very confusing transfer of ownership from Ledgewood Board. From when it was built under a different entity, it turned into a condo association, it split into a different homeowner association, and there was confusion as to who properly owned this section of the roadway. There was always intent to deed that portion of the roadway to the city, as is fairly typical of any community housing projects. A lot of times, we'd have agreement that the developers would come through and say, hey, we're going to build this road. Will the city take it over after we're done? And that had happened in this instance. However, the real kicker in all of this was the incorrect entity deeded the roadway to the city. And this wasn't found out until a few years later. It was never formally accepted via resolution and just kind of had been sitting there in limbo land for a while. So that had become known in 2018. I would also like to, he wasn't able to attend today, but I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you all without the help of Mr. Andrew Prendamano of the Ledgewood One Condo Association. Him and his team and their title attorneys put together a lot of this documentation and were able to give us and the city the information we needed to feel comfortable moving forward. So again, he's not here today, but for public record, I'd like to thank Mr. Prendamano and all of his work here. So as we continue to dive in and better understand, again, this extremely confusing transfer of deed and ownership pertaining to the parcel, part of the city's checklist to accept these streets, we look at a few things. Number one, Ledgewood Circle is a critical linking street. Without that road, you wouldn't be able to get from Oak Beach to Austin and vice versa. We wouldn't be able to run detours through there. If those folks so chose, they could technically close the road. The city taking ownership of this parcel allows us to do things like put in MUTCD compliant stop signs, establish parking regulations. We do have some plans to build a future sidewalk in that location. But most critically, it allows the city to own this connecting piece of roadway that links these neighborhoods together. There you go. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, and so just to be clear, so this is the boundary plat that was put together by a land surveyor. And what we're talking about here is just this middle divided piece of the road here. We own Oak Beach Drive, that would go over to the west. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, these other streets,
That's public.
so that's
This is
public,
public.
and then Ledgewood Drive as it continues into the condo association proper remains private. But that's the piece of real estate that has been identified, it's been surveyed, it's been monumented. So that was the chunk of roadway that, again, had always been intended on being deeded to the city. And due to some missing paperwork, we were never able to formally accept. There was a couple other things I just wanted to say. So with this right away acceptance, a couple other things, it allows the city to incorporate this mileage, well, not much, to our overall street network list. Every year we certify the amount of miles of roadway the city owns that goes to the state, and we get a level of funding based off the total mileage that we have for our road classes of network. So again, it's not a huge road segment, but we would be happy to add that to the list, and for what it's worth, be able to receive some additional funding in that regard. As we, really started to go through the checklist of, hey, is the city gonna take on a liability here? Is this thing gonna be a thorn in our side for years to come? It's not in our best interest. So to kind of cover our bases and hedge our bets on that front. And again, part of our right-of-way acceptance procedure is we check in with every single department that has a vested interest in this. So in this case, street maintenance, our water resources division, my team within technical services for, again, future planning, parking, signage, things like that. Also duplicated by the traffic division, parks and rec, BED for the street lights, and the fire department, just to make sure they have clear and ample access to use the road. This road's been here a while. This whole general neighborhood was constructed around 1980. There were minimal to no comments from other city departments on accepting this roadway. We did have to work through a few challenges in terms of the street lights, which will be upgraded to current standards at some point in the future. Accepting the street really in turn, come to find out, requires BED to update the lighting to meet these current standards. And that's something that's been added onto their future capital work list. And yeah, we found some old utilities that were buried in there. We ended up disconnecting an old force main, just to avoid any potential issues with that, any surcharges from the overall collection system. So yeah, again, happy to report that we were able to achieve all our sign-offs. And this boundary survey was a big piece of that. Again, a lot of the on the ground legwork was done by the Ledgewood folks. They hired the land surveyor. They obtained a title insurance for the property. And what that really says is that's kind of just a document that says a professional title attorney looked at this. There are no hidden surprises in this, and we can guarantee the deed is free and clear up until we just updated it, so it would be current through like 2 weeks ago. And that's just an extra assurance for the city to say, hey, no one's got a lien on this thing. There are no hidden surprises. No one's going to come out of the woodworks and suddenly claim ownership of this. We had the warranty deed drafted up. Again, this plat has been monumented and recorded. So I think that's about it. Yeah. And happy to take any questions or discuss further.
No questions for me?
I guess this is kind of like just a more general, higher level question of what is going, besides what you've already described, I guess, specifically what is going to change with this transfer of ownership in regards to how will this relatively small piece of road serviced differently?
Great question. And really no different than how you see today. The city has always maintained a minimum level of service on the street. We plow Oak Beach Drive, we're gonna go plow Austin, we just keep the blade down. We've always historically filled some potholes and things like that. So really, as you see it today, there will be no change. The road will continue to function as it always has. We'll just own it now and we'll, yeah, have full role and ownership of that. Yeah, again, a fairly critical street to that overall neighborhood.
Yeah, I gotta like, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, if I could add some context to that. One, this started in part due 5, 6 years ago about wanting to sign a bike route to connect different neighborhoods. We can't sign a bike route on property we don't own. So that was concern. Not being able to use this as a detour, another concern. We do not make a habit of accepting private streets in the city that haven't been brought up to standard. We don't want, the council has told us we don't want to accept private streets that aren't built to the city standard. Because we're putting a liability on property taxpayers to maintain this in perpetuity. The difference here is similar to Franklin Square. We had an agreement decades old that the city was intending to take this over, but never effectuated it. And two, we have operational needs to the modern day. This is not a cul-de-sac that goes nowhere, but is part of the city's resilient grid structure. We did require, Caleb, you mentioned that the sewer work was being done to disconnect and abandon force main. The piece I don't think you mentioned is that we're requiring the property owner to pay us for that. They're
Yes.
reimbursing
Yes, we do.
us.
Yeah.
So in other words, they're having to bring the corridor up to some reasonable standard that we technically are willing to support. It's not perfect, but because of the past history, because it's connected, we're willing to recommend you all consider accepting it.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Chapin. That was very
Yeah.
well said. Yeah.
Good, thank you. I'm obviously supportive of this, but I had a question about the disconnected force main. Is this something you can just disconnect the force main? It's not being used for anything, or?
You can. So there was an old pump station from when they originally built that whole neighborhood condo area. Again, we're talking early 1980s. So at some point in time, again, I'm going to say around the early 1980s, all of Ledgewood Circle collected all the condo sewage in one central pump station and pumped it up to Austin Drive. At some, I imagine.
From here up to here, to the gravity system.
I'd have to imagine, based on the information I've seen, also around the early 1980s, Oak Beach Drive hadn't been built yet either. So that came very, very shortly after the Ledgewood condos were constructed. Once that happened, I'd have to imagine municipal infrastructure was in place. There was an easy connection for gravity, and Ledgewood said, "Oh, great, we don't have to pump for sewer anymore."
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But they had left that pipe in the ground. The old maps we found in the land record showed, a clear cut and cap, so it was disconnected. And until that thing unfortunately got a little too full, we all thought it was disconnected too. So again, to Chapin's point, part of our right of way checklist, making things are up to current standards, that was one thing that was pointed out. Again, no cost to the city. But to achieve our sign offs, that was something our water department was very clear on, and we were able to work out an agreement to get that resolved.
Thank you.
I think I said, yeah, we do have some plans to, we built we actually put a crosswalk in on Austin Drive right at the bend. Just to the north of Ledgewood Circle. Obviously, we didn't own that piece of roadway at the time, but that is on our future radar, and time and funding allowable. We would love to link the pedestrian network there too.
You ready for a motion?
If you're ready to offer one, absolutely.
Okay, I would move that the two recommend full acceptance of a portion of the street known as Ledgewood Circle from current ownership group Ledgewood One Condominium Board to the Board of Finance and City Council, subject to final review and approval by the City Attorney's Office.
Second. Any discussion, further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? please indicate by saying aye. Aye. That's unanimous. Great, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Not right.
Not, we've got a used car.
And the last item on our agenda, deliberative agenda is the ParkMobile user fee policy change. Yeah, that's on that.
Yeah, Jackie's got a very short.
Very short.
5-slide presentation.
Okay, perfect. So with our current ParkMobile contract, which ended at the end of January, customer pays 30 cents. So if parking fee is $1, the customer pays $1.30. The city is responsible for all transaction fees. So the city is the merchant of record. We receive all the money. Right now, we're giving 5 cents back to ParkMobile as part of a revenue share, and then we take in we keep 5 cents. We give the 25 cents to ParkMobile, and then we pay the transaction fees. We lowered them a little bit, but it's anywhere from 3 to 6% of each transaction. With the new contract, the fee is going to increase from 30 to 35 cents or 15% up to $2.50 per transaction, whichever is greater. The city will no longer be paying any of the transaction fees. ParkMobile they'll be the merchant of record, so all the money will go to ParkMobile, and then we will get the $1 for parking. So using a sample from last July, August, and September, there was 280,000 transactions. 72% of these transactions would only pay the additional 5 cents. So almost 3/4 of people would only pay an additional 5 cents. And then you can see the breakdown. 28 transactions would pay the full $2.50. The break even is about $2.40. So if your parking is less than that, you pay 35. If it's over 240, you would pay 36 and up.
And basically, the people who are paying $2 for a convenience fee are the ones who are staying all day at an expensive meter, paying $20 for the parking session.
It's probably more like overnight, a couple days in the downtown garage kind of thing too.
Yeah.
This is just comparison. Currently, we're losing about 15% revenue with the credit card fees. And with the new contract, we would not lose any. And then Parks is a little bit different. Obviously, they're not open all year. They pay less transaction fees, less transactions. Their fees are a little bit more. So if you were to go to North Beach for a full day, you would pay more than that 35 cent transaction fee because it's greater, but yeah, a little different. So just a couple notable things. There is still the option to pay with coin at all the garages and all permanent parking spaces. I put permanent. We have, I think, 3 or 4 spots on Bank Street for construction zone that are ParkMobile only right now. That will go back to kiosks as soon as that construction is done. Just another thing to note, we're replacing single space meters with multi-space meters. So I'm sure you all know the kiosks. These accept coin and credit card. You can also pay at these spots with mobile. And we don't need any action because the city is not paying anything. There's no payment at all from the city for ParkMobile.
That said, we brought it to you all because of the interest in parking and wanting to make sure that the council was aware of this policy direction of changing from us paying the credit card fees to what I understand to be more of a consistent administration decision, that if you want to pay electronically and that there are costs of accepting that payment, that the user would incur those costs, not the city. So happy to receive your input on this. If there's great concern, we can have more process. We have not executed this contract. ParkMobile has continued to honor its previous terms through this interim period, but it's now 4 or 5 months out from the expiration, and they're eager to have us get under contract. I think one last piece is we understand that as other contracts around the country renew, that they are moving towards this model. And as we have called other areas and compared prices, we have made the case to ParkMobile that we have brought in UVM, Champlain College, Pula has now joined ParkMobile. Like, we are the center of the ecosystem that has developed their business. It's been successful here. They are giving us a reasonable rate when compared with other regions, but we do think it is fair for the user to pay the user fees. Happy to get your questions, thoughts, all that.
Ready?
I agree with your analysis. I agree that it is reasonable for that, especially when the 35 cents is definitely less than what most other cities and towns are using for ParkMobile. So, so especially, when we're going into what I would consider a bigger, more cosmopolitan area like Burlington. I do think that that's where the cost should lie, as opposed to the city, which, as we know, the city, it's not just the city, it's by its residents as well. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. And then if you're going to, not only you're going to Burlington, but you're also paying less fees than if you go to Montpelier. Just on your chart, you have Montpelier, Woodstock, and St. Albans.
Yeah.
You are paying less than those three places.
Yeah.
So I think this is great, and I support it.
Sure, yeah, I unfortunately cannot support this right now, just because of everything we're seeing going on in the downtown. And, where I get requests from businesses downtown and people who work there almost every day, I mean, multiple times a week. Our downtown's really in crisis, and normally I think this would be a very reasonable ask. But it's just not right now. And, I had a meeting this morning, and, somebody who runs a nightlife establishment was saying that college students have started going out to buy, Merrick, maybe you see this differently, and I'm curious to hear your perspective, but they're hearing reports that college students are going out, to bars in Winooski and Williston, because they don't even want to go downtown to Burlington. And maybe that's not the best example, because maybe they're walking and not parking, but I just hear these really troubling stories about people, flocking to other cities. And that is wildly beyond the scope of what we have in front of us. And I acknowledge that, but I don't feel comfortable giving the stamp of approval to anything that would cause any friction to somebody coming to visit us, even if it's 5 cents. That's just where I'm at right now.
Okay. Do you want to respond, or do you want me to ask?
Why don't you, happy to respond, but go ahead.
Oh, go ahead and respond.
Yes, I think those are valuable and reasonable perspectives. What I would say is that there are options, so people can avoid fees. There are options that we are moving towards to offer new product that we give. I think not everybody's working full-time downtown anymore, so we need more part-time flex permits. And one of the pieces we're trying to do is bring in license plate recognition, which we'll talk about next in my director's report. But I think fundamentally a key piece is that we need to remember that the traffic fund funds so much more than just parking. It's funding crossing guards, signs and lines, it paints bike lanes, it repairs all the signals and the RFBs at no cost to the taxpayer. We are nearly insolvent, and I cannot express that more clearly. And yes, downtown is fragile. COVID killed the office market downtown. Heard it. I watched my language on a recorded meeting, but we are desperately trying to rebuild both the parking facilities fund, which is off street, and the traffic fund, which is on street. And yes, downtown is hurting, and we need to be able to offer new programs, which cost some money, and we need to be solvent so that we can get kids to school safely, etc. It is a tough balance.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And I appreciate
And
that.
so how we navigate these waters together, I want to work in partnership with you, not against you. So these are tough times.
Yeah, I think and like I said, I don't think what you're asking for is unreasonable at all.
Yeah.
I think in order to feel more comfortable with it, I would need to, I would like us to just. Another piece that I think is missing is like comprehensive support plan for our downtown that ties in parking and construction issues and, business and workforce development. And we're just not
Yeah.
seeing that prioritization happen. And so I think that would help.
Yeah.
And then also just seeing, I know we're gonna hear from you on some free parking options. But maybe if we had that in place, like, I think I just need a more holistic view.
Yeah.
Because of course we need to fund crossing guards and all of that, but it's just sort of, this just seems like another, tax fee, or whatever you want to call it, on visitors at a time when, there's just not enough other holistic support. So, yeah,
Okay.
it's tricky.
Understood.
So I'm gonna split the difference here. I totally don't, I think it's a reasonable request. I think it's in line with market forces. I like the idea of the city not paying the credit card fees. But I also am with Becca on, we talk, some of us on the council have been talking about how do we remove the friction that we have downtown, and parking's definitely a component of it. I've mentioned in other meetings, I'd be a proponent. The marketplace garage, we tried to remove some of that friction at our last meeting, and maybe we're on a way toward doing that, because we know that there are visitors who are, find some of the activities in that garage off-putting, and they don't want to park there. So
Right.
how do we like remove the friction of parking by making the parking, safe, welcoming, affordable, and manage these fiscal constraints we have in the city, and I think we can do it, but like when, we have these sort of charter mandated, restricted funding
Right.
mechanisms for various pieces of our transportation
Right.
funding, and how do we unstick all that, and maybe that's a bigger question, but
Yeah.
in the short term, if we could do some incentives around parking, I think I'm supportive of this if we can do those. But also we need to do the incentives, so it's more of an and I have a question specifically around how it pertains to this request, is that if you have a 2-hour free parking promotion, let's say. How would that work with ParkMobile? Do we eat the 35 cents, or do we charge the 35 cents and eat the parking?
I believe that ParkMobile will charge the 35 cents.
And then, so you'll get on there, your first 2 hours, you won't pay a thing, and then after 2 hours.
No, you would pay. So if you go to the downtown garage right now, we're at 2 hours free, and you click through to 2 hours. If you're using ParkMobile, you pay 30 cents.
Be 30 cents, and then, like, if you extended, then you'd pay.
You pay $1.
You wouldn't pay the transaction fee again, but you'd pay.
The fee to
You'd pay
park.
the fee to park.
Yes, no transaction fee though, which is different than other towns. If you extend out in another town, you pay the transaction fee again, which we don't have that agreement here.
Right.
So that's nice.
And that would stay, that would
That's
stay.
staying, yes.
You can confirm that with them. right?
Yes, that's always how it's been. That's staying how it is.
Okay.
There won't be double transaction fees if you extend out.
So in terms of like, how do we get to a more rather than just deal with this particular item? Like, could we bundle it with a bigger, like you said, you don't need any action from us.
Right.
But I would also like to see a more comprehensive approach to this. So yeah, we need
Yeah.
to update our ParkMobile fees, but we have this other plan to
Offering.
address
Right.
parking in the downtown.
Yeah, I agree.
That's good feedback that we've heard from you, and there's no action needed here, but and we can buy ourselves a little time, so why don't Jackie and I get together, talk about what we could do. Additionally, part of what's in my director's report is considering unwinding the relationship with Courthouse Plaza, parking garage, which could generate some additional funding that we could reinvest in a different type of promotion. So,
And while we're talking about it, and it's sort of adjacent to this conversation, but it is under ParkMobile, is I've mentioned Marketplace Garage. My anecdotal evidence is that there's often underutilized parking certain times. But would there be a way for us, I mean, if we're not getting anything now for it and we gave it away for free, except for 35 cent transaction fee in ParkMobile for, could you zone the parking garage so the upper floors were a different zone and were
Right.
eventually under a different,
yeah,
or something along
Right.
that line to try to like generate interest. And if we could clean up the reputation of that garage, which is probably more challenging than some of these technical changes we're asking about. But if we
Yeah.
could, we get people parking there again. I wonder what that might do.
Yeah.
To help solve some of this.
good suggestions. Jackie, are you okay if we think through kind of how to package a more global offering and come back with the understanding that, you know, we are trying to rebuild the health of this fund. So, you know, we can't give away a ton, but we hear your point about a coordinated strategy and we can put something together.
I think we just probably need to check with ParkMobile, 'cause it's been a while since the contract, but.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's fine. I think either way, it's important to understand too, either way, the price would have to go up, like the 30 cent fee would have to increase. But yeah, we can talk through some other options.
Okay. So we will try to come back to you, you know, probably before the next two, just because I know our vendor is interested in wrapping this up.
This
Okay.
will also be in your budget modeling, is assuming that this has happened in terms of like some of the credit card charges that were.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is in our budget modeling.
Okay, anything else on this?
No action needed.
No action needed, is it? Yes, it is. Thank you, Jim. Director's report.
Great. I am just gonna run quickly through. We tried to do a good job in putting a lot of written materials together. Hopefully you made it through it. On the license plate recognition software implementation, we wanted to let you know at the last meeting, you all had good questions. One of the key questions that Councilor Bergman raised was, have you talked to staff? We had continued that work. We had a meeting with the union, AFSCME president, as well as union steward. There is concern that long-term this technology could limit the number of parking ambassadors needed, parking agents needed to do compliance. I have told them that I have operated this department and have shifted need for staffing and have not had to do layoffs. I've done every change within DPW through attrition. My intent, if this thing were so efficient that we needed fewer people in parking enforcement, we could put more people on asset management, equipment maintenance, because our signals need upgrading, our streets need more potholing, etc. So we have had those conversations. We are planning, because the budget is predicated on us bringing the general fund over $800,000 through fines to support the general fund's activity, that we're proposing to use this technology mainly in residential permit parking areas and in the garages. Those are two places where vehicle kind of circulating is efficient. In downtown, it's more efficient to have our agents walking around town. So I wanted, just in full transparency, we worked with the mayor's office to put together a privacy policy. And Rob, have you been able to upload this?
It is uploaded as of today.
Great. This was a late addition, but we have a mayor's approved privacy policy that gets at some of the concerns that you also raised last time. What are the protections of this data? I am comfortable with this. We largely use this. We use the same technology on the handheld devices already. The difference would be, instead of a handheld device aiming at the license plate, it would just be a car mounted camera. So we're planning to move ahead in full transparency on that. Number two, DPW transportation projects update. Philip Peterson wants to return next month to give you a full lay of the land of what grants we have secured already, what projects are underway, and whether any of them are at risk with the federal administration. So you can see what commitments we've already made. And at the same time, the administration has directed me to really focus on fixing what we already have before applying for new stuff. The challenge ultimately with grants is the grants don't fund existing things. So we're going to need to balance the pressure you all hear and I hear from constituents wanting more stuff, whether it's new crosswalks or whether it's bike lanes or a new shared use path, new roadway with the Champlain Parkway, versus the fix it first kind of approach. So I'm hopeful next month we could spend some time kind of discussing the mayor's priorities and your priorities and figuring out how to reconcile all that. Third item is the courthouse plaza parking agreement, next steps. There was did I include a memo on this one in the packet? No, okay, I did not. As you know, as part of the Great Streets Main Street, we have subleased the third floor of the courthouse plaza parking garage, which is 86 spaces from Unified Parking Partners, UPP. I did ask Jackie to get me the financial summary, and what we promised we're hitting. We said we thought we'd bring in about 2/3 of the revenue for the garage through user fees, and we'd be subsidizing 1/3. That's generally where we're landing. It is, however, $5,000 a month of subsidy, and our parking fund is thin. So we are going to be done the most invasive amount of work by this fall on Main Street. Our proposal that we're about committed on, but want your opinion, is to terminate this sublease agreement with Unified Parking Partners. We have to give them 30-day notice. So if we give them notice in the next 2 or 3 days, we can terminate the contract as of June 30th. The Main Street and Winooski lot is fully open at this point. It's been repaved and is back in action. And the utility work, that's the deep invasive work, is going to be done in 6 weeks. So we are going to be on more superficial work. Want to hear from you and your thoughts. Our thought is that if we got out of this agreement, the parking is still publicly accessible to Courthouse Plaza, just at higher rates. And then we can use the money that we're putting towards subsidy and look at a different type of promotion that maybe gets to some of your interests, in combination with some of the potential user fees we'd be saving by the new ParkMobile contract. So wanted to lay out that direction and get your quick feedback. So those were 3 substantive items, but wanted to get in front of the commission or committee.
I have some questions, but I don't need to go first. I mean, I think, again, this sounds very reasonable. I guess I'm just, I would want to make sure we did some outreach. You know, I don't know exactly who's parking at that garage, but
yeah,
I imagine it might be staff or some of the businesses around Main Street.
Right.
You know, if there's folks using that resource regularly and they've like finally, you know, they've figured out their workaround for the construction, and then we're going to change it all up. You know, that's very frustrating and stressful.
Right.
So I think I would just ask that we do some, you know, I know I see the emails you're on too, and that you're in touch with those folks a lot.
Yeah.
So I guess I would ask that before we make this a done deal, you reach out and explain, hey, now this lot's open across the street. You're just going to move from there to the one at Winooski.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure we have the capacity, similar capacity.
Right.
Because that's what this sounds like to me. It's like we're taking the courthouse parking and we're gonna move it back to the city lot, which I think sounds good, but we just need to help people along and make sure that doesn't cause friction, I would say. And then, you know, for customer parking, we need to make sure the businesses, if they've been telling people, hey, go to the
Right.
courthouse lot, now they have some good.
Here's the new
directions for people.
place to park. The one challenge, and that all sounds good, and yes, we can communicate, we know all the permit holders that have permits with us. Is that the plan for the main Winooski lot, which has largely been a transient lot, would remain a transient lot, so the nearest kind of monthly permit parking location would be Marketplace Garage. So there would be a 2-block walk to Main Street from Bank Street, as opposed to, being immediately adjacent. So that's the one kind of thing that we would lose, is approximate monthly parking location.
Right. Well, maybe, I mean, I think, can you bring that up with the people who have the permits and just see, I think just
Yeah,
a conversation
that's
about
right.
this would.
Yeah.
Would go a long way.
Agreed. We're happy to do that.
I'm supportive of this as well. I think, you and I talked chatting about this. So I think it's a good move, but I take like a points about making sure we don't surprise anything.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, just so stressful, you're going to work, like your shift starts at 4:30 at a bar and you're used to parking at this garage and then you're late and everybody's pissed at you. I mean, it's just so
Yeah.
stressful. I've been there.
Right.
And so, we just don't want to pile that on anyone.
Yeah.
And any other comments on the other director?
Anything else on license plate reader technology, or next meeting, talking about transportation capital project
I
updates?
I don't think I was at the meeting when you talked about license plate reader technology. Maybe it was 2 meetings ago. So-
Was it, I think it was before your
It may have
tenure
been-
on this
it may
committee.
have
It was
been
like
like
6 months ago.
tenure.
Yeah, it was 6 months
Okay,
ago or
I
so,
think.
January, I think.
And so just to clarify, I mean, I get the like efficiency part, right? You're driving around in a car instead of getting out in and out and it just reads it like automatically, like how fast can they drive the car? And how much are we anticipating that this will increase the amount of ground that they can cover in a day and therefore increase the amount of tickets that are issued and
Right, we're taking it slow and budgeting this year for the same amount of people, because it's a new technology and we need to really understand it, utilize it well. But the hope is for residential permanent parking areas that the car can travel at 20-25 miles an hour. It'll beep when it hits something that's not paid, then we'll have to find a safe place to park. And the agent will get out and take photos, confirm non-payment, and give the ticket as they do currently. So, yeah, it is a technology that exists. I think the main piece out there publicly that has generated concern is that often this technology is used by law enforcement and that it can be connected to criminal databases. We will only have this connected to our parking software. So we're not going to know if somebody who's parked that car has a criminal record. But we're gonna know whether the car has a parking session and is paid
Yeah.
for parking.
We're also gonna be able to offer new permits. So for hybrid workers who only work in the office, let's say 8 days per month, they can purchase like a punch card. And then each time that their vehicle's in the garage, one punch gets taken out and then, it'll just be a reduced cost. And a lot of people are not working 5 days a week. Our permits right now are every day or Monday through Friday. So it's just not conducive to the way that people are working at this moment. This will be a better option for that.
Right. Also, my own residential parking pass is expired and I need to. fix
Go next
that
door.
Today.
Jackie,
So I
I'll help
don't
you.
get a ticket from this new machine.
Other comments on the director's report? Move on to, Councilor Items. Councilor Items. I have 2. I'll just go as you continue to think. First is, I had talked to Chapin about, making some time next month to talk about the Winooski River Bike Bridge. I have a constituent who's been very vocal. It's been canoeing, taking photos, sharing those photos, but the the bridge is getting undermined behind the bridge abutment, just by the Winooski River, and so there's been some discussion, but to this point, I think it's fair to say that nobody has said, well, that's our responsibility. Yeah, it's undermining that critical connection across the Winooski longer term. It's one of those things that the longer it goes, probably the more expensive it will be, but requires probably a more formal engineering assessment and things, but
Yeah.
we'll be taking a little bit of time just to talk about that next month.
Yeah.
And my other one, I guess I'll just talk to you privately. It's about another one of these roads. It's the North Avenue extension beyond
Yeah.
the bike path and the condition of that road and how we're going to address it because.
Right.
And I would like to understand more about that. But
And what I've promised to Mark is a written response about its condition, its nature of an unaccepted street, what we're committing to doing, what we can't do, and allow that to hopefully, evolve the conversation with the.
and that might be useful for other councilors as well, because we have a number of these throughout the city.
Yeah.
That are in these sort of various states of sort of uncertainty.
Yes.
And maintenance neglect, so. That'd be helpful.
Yeah.
And anybody else have council items? No? Next meeting, tentatively scheduled for the 24th of June, time TBD. We didn't know, we don't have Gene here. I know he'll be back from his European adventure by then, we think. But we don't know whether or not a day or an evening meeting. I think we had said last time we're gonna oscillate between the two.
That was my recollection.
Does that work?
I will say that I mean, we could do whatever we want, whatever everybody wants for the 24th, but ideally we would have the daytime meetings after we have a city council meeting the night before.
Do we have a city council?
And we do. So I would angle for a noon meeting on the 24th and then, but we could look in July. Yeah, because our July meeting is not after a council meeting, so maybe we could do that one at night, but it's a lot. I don't know about you all, but I am so tired. Two in a row is like, I am not a useful human being with good brain cells.
I'm agnostic. I don't know how you feel.
First of all, I'm fine with noon meetings in the summer. Probably not gonna work once the semester starts in the fall for me. I'm comfortable reassessing whether or not we need to push up our evening meetings, if that's even possible, to an earlier time than, was it 5:30? 5, I'd be open to discussing pushing that up. But noon's not gonna work in the fall, but it'll work for June.
So why don't we, it sounds like we would like to have it in midday in June, and then we'll have Gene back and we can all assess together what makes sense for July and August, and then it sounds like we'll be back maybe to eat more evenings of the fall.
And Rob, that looks good, right? Because the design advisory board doesn't need the room till 2:30.
Yeah, the room is free until 2:30. That's right.
Which puts a constraint on how long our meeting can go, which I like.
Yeah.
I also have to leave to get my kids around
Okay.
30, so
Great.
for today, we wouldn't.
It'll make us be efficient.
We covered a lot of ground today.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I can do that, yeah. Details. With no further business and without, we'll adjourn us at 2:50.